Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to show you guys the battles that I played to reach veteran this season. And I used an unoriginal team because we've definitely seen this team on my channel before. It is going to be Dragonite Double Fire in the Master Premier Cup. But even though I used this team last season, and I really liked it, by the way, I climbed so much with it, it's still going pretty strong, and as long as the team is going to perform well, I'm going to use it. Eventually, I do change the lead to Goodra just to test out how Goodra is, and currently I am in the 2600s with Goodra, but I still prefer the team with Dragonite. Goodra is going to take care of that really glaring Primarina weakness, but even with Dragonite on the team, I learned how to play around the Primarinas and how to handle them. So I still prefer Dragonite, again, also because Dragonite is going to output so much more damage than Goodra. It's going to take care of opposing dragon types a lot better than Goodra can, because Goodra, it will only have non-stab moves. It is going to have Thunder Punch and Aqua Tail, which both won't have that same type attack boost. But Dragonite, on the other hand, is going to have that Dragon Claw. It's going to be able to threaten the Steel types with the superpower. So I just liked Dragonite a lot more. And the team is already weak to Dragon types. Like, the backline is extremely weak to Dragon types. So you kind of need something on the lead that is going to be able to handle those a lot better. Also, up against Gyarados, if they double shield your Thunder Punches, Goodra is still going to lose, and the Gyarados is going to survive with a lot of health for your backline. So keep that in mind. Usually I get straight into the commentary for the battles, but I'm going to try to discuss as much as I can about the team before getting into the battles, because the battles going on in the background, they're not that special, honestly. I did hit veteran about 2 or 3 days ago, so the meta has shifted quite a bit since then, and I wanted to tell you guys what the biggest weaknesses for the team are and how I handle those. Obviously, there are some teams that you're just not going to be able to win against, and that's just how the game is. But I would like to discuss how I handle some of the Pokemon that I come up against. So first off, we've already covered that Primarina is definitely a huge issue for the team. However, I've adapted to it, and I can tell you guys now that most of the teams that have Primarina, I can win against maybe 80 or 90% of the time, which is pretty decent. That's if they don't have something in the back that is also going to be good against fire types. So usually with Primarina lead, what I'll do is I'll stay in a little bit with Dragonite. If they have Waterfall, then I am going to stay in and soft lose. I'll farm up as much as I can. I'll keep Dragon Breathing, and I will wait until the Primarina throws the Disarming Voice. If they throw a Moonblast, then that's just unfortunate, but I will usually wait until they throw a Disarming Voice first, and then I will throw a Superpower. That way I don't debuff myself before they throw their move. So once I've thrown that Superpower, I'll usually throw 2 Superpowers, and then I will immediately swap out into Skeletor. I do not want them to farm me down, but I'll swap out into Skeletor, and I will start damaging the Primarina. Usually I can take it out. I might have to throw a Disarming Voice against the Primarina to take it out. But in a lot of cases, Primarina lead is not going to have something in the back that is going to be good against your fire and ghost types. So a lot of Primarinas are going to be paired with maybe a, let's say an Annihilate, or maybe another Steel type. So usually your backline is going to be really good against whatever they have in the back, as long as you can get that Primarina out of the way and also not use any shields. I should say as well that a lot of Primarina leads are not going to have a Gyarados in the back, otherwise their team is going to be ABA weak to Magnezone. So keep that in mind. Now, another issue that this team has is going to be Rhyperior, and I thought if I change the lead to Goodra, then maybe I'll be able to take care of the Rhyperiors a lot better, but I was wrong. When I put Goodra on the team, the Goodra was going to be taking neutral damage from the Mud Slaps, and I was just taking a lot more damage from the Rhyperior. So I liked Dragonite a lot more, because Dragonite was outputting a lot more damage again with the Dragon Breaths, and I was able to get the Rhyperior into a range where I could take care of it a lot more efficiently with the Dragonite than the Goodra. Of course, also with Goodra, the Rhyperior was just shielding all of my Aquatails. But there is this really annoying team, and I don't know if this is a content creator's team, but there's a team with Rhyperior lead and Gyarados in the back. That one is so tricky to deal with. Most of the times, I will just lose against that team. Like I said, some teams you're just gonna lose against. I also lose against double water teams. Like sometimes there might be a dragon double water or like a fairy double water team. I lose to that. I lose to double dragon teams, which I am starting to see a lot more of. And when I put Goodra on the team, then Garchomp became an issue, and for some reason I am seeing a lot more Garchomps. I think people are starting to see that Garchomp is really good against like the steel types. It's going to be able to hit for neutral with that earth power against the fairy types, and I think a lot more people are seeing fire types because Skeletor is extremely good in this meta. This is an ABB team, and as with most ABB teams, you wanna try to swap one of your back Pokemon to draw out the biggest counter for your backline. So in a lot of situations, I will swap aggressively into the Skeletor to draw out the Gyarados. In most situations, it is going to be a Gyarados. If you draw out a Snorlax, then if they don't have Earthquake, you actually could beat it, but a lot of them are running Earthquake, and I've seen a lot of Snorlaxes running Skull Bash as well, so people are getting creative with the moveset on their Snorlaxes, which is unfortunate for me, but oh well. And once Skeletor has drawn out the biggest weakness for the backline, Dragonite will be able to take care of it, and then Chandelure should be able to sweep in the back. But a lot of cases, you have to try to save shields for Chandelure because Chandelure cannot take moves. Even up against fairy types like Florges, 2 Moonblasts are going to be enough to take the Chandelure out. So Skeletor is your safe swap. Anything you lose lead to, you swap immediately into that Skeletor and you start damaging it. In fact, I don't think there's anything in this meta that Skeletor will not do well against. So even up against like a Waterfall user, because Skeletor is quite bulky, it is going to be able to reach a move or multiple moves up against that Pokemon and do quite a bit of damage. Up against a normal type, the Incinerate is going to be doing neutral damage, the Disarming Voice is going to be doing neutral damage. Up against a water type, the Shadow Ball is going to be really good against it. And up against dragon types, it has Disarming Voice to hit for super effective. So Skeletor, in my opinion, is one of the absolute best safe swaps in Master League Premier right now. Alright, now with Goodra in place of Dragonite, on the lead, it is going to struggle a lot against dragon types, and even against Dragon Breath Gyarados, because in a lot of situations that Gyarados is going to shield your Thunder Punches, and if it survives with a lot of HP for your backline, then it's going to be very tricky to deal with. With Goodra on the team, Dragonite becomes a huge issue. The way I like to deal with Dragonite is if it's on the lead, and most of the time, only if it's on the lead, you'll be able to take care of it. If it's in the back, then that's just unfortunate. But I will soft lose to Dragonite with Goodra, and with the Dragon Breath damage and the Thunder Punch damage, you should be able to get it into the red and into a range where you can incinerate it down with Skeletor. And if you can incinerate the Dragonite down with your Skeletor, you'll have a lot of energy, and that energy is going to be very good for you. Also, do not invest any shields onto Goodra. A lot of the time, Dragonite is going to have a backline that your 2 fire types are going to be able to take care of. It is not going to have a Gyarados in the back. If it does, then, you know, oh well. It's an unbalanced team, but it might happen. But a lot of the times, it is going to have maybe a fairy type in the back or a steel type. So your fire types should be able to take care of those. Also, it might have a Skeletor in the back. And if your Skeletor has an energy lead, then you should be able to win against it. Alright, we are 9 minutes into the video, and I have not commentated on any of my battles yet, so hopefully I've been thorough. If you guys have any questions, feel free to ask in the comments. I will gladly answer them. I only have a few more matches to show you guys. I already spoke through half of them, so let's just jump into these battles. Up first, it looks like we are going to see that really annoying Rhyperior lead, and my opponent swaps into Gyarados. So, I'm not sure here what to do. I'm pretty sure this ends in a loss, but I stay in with Dragonite and I throw a Dragon Claw and my opponent actually shields it, which is really annoying. I needed this Gyarados to be a little bit lower in HP, but I'm kind of stuck with, do I stay in up against this Gyarados or do I swap out into Skeletor? I need my Dragonite for the Rhyperior, but if I swap into Skeletor, I know I'm not going to be able to take care of it. They even shielded my Shadow Ball, so they double shielded this Gyarados. I have a feeling my opponent is going to have a Fairy type in the back because of how much they're protecting their Gyarados. I shielded a Crunch. My opponent still gets to an Aqua Tail, and at this point, I don't think I'm going to be able to take care of this Rhyperior, so I go ahead and I top left. That is one of the teams that is just going to wreck you, unfortunately. On to the next battle, we are going to see a Hippowdon lead, and this thing can spam out these Weather Balls so quickly, so my entire team is going to struggle against it. My opponent even swaps out into a Braviary, and I decide to stay in with Dragonite and throw a Dragon Claw, get it pretty low, and then I bring in Skeletor, and I actually don't know what this thing has. Turns out it has Rock Slide, and I'm just going to stick to a full farm down here. So I go ahead and I shield this next Rock Slide. I should be able to incinerate this Braviary down, and my opponent is going to bring their Hippowdon back in. I'm going to go for a Shadow Ball, and they let it land, which is good for me. I even reach a Disarming Voice up against this Hippowdon, expecting my opponent's shield. They don't. They decide to let it go, and I have no idea what my opponent can have in the back. I just bring in Chandelure to get a little bit of an energy lead on it, and it looks like my opponent is going to have a Primarina running Charm. So that's really good for me. Chandelure is going to be able to beat this. I'm just going to go straight Flame Charge up against this Primarina, and this next one will take their final shield, and I should be able to reach one more Flame Charge. Just barely reached it, and this will be enough to take the Primarina out. I can bring my Dragonite back in and farm the Hippowdon down, which was 1 HP, and take that win. But huge respect to the opponent for running that spice. Moving on to the next battle, we are going to see a Florges lead, which is terrible for me. I immediately swap into my Skeletor. My opponent is going to bring in a Snorlax. I am just going to start spamming out these Disarming Voices, and I think I might be able to take the Snorlax out if I shield my Skeletor. My opponent goes ahead and shields the Disarming Voice. Now I can choose here to shield and throw a Disarming Voice and take my opponent's final shield potentially, or Wind Switch, but I decide to let Skeletor go. Unfortunately, they do have Earthquake. I was really hoping they would have Superpower and Body Slam, but I am calling that whatever my opponent has in the back, I think I am going to be able to take care of it with Chandelure, so I want to save those shields for my Chandelure. And it looks like they are going to have an Annihilate in the back, so really good that I saved these shields, because now I am going to be able to double shield my Chandelure, and I should be able to reach another Shadow Ball here. I probably could have gone for the Flame Charge, but the Shadow Ball was the safer call. I need to get this Annihilate out of the way. My opponent is going to bring that Florges back in, and I should be able to reach another Shadow Ball up against it. It is going to survive the Shadow Ball, however, so I'm going to throw the Shadow Ball here. I have energy on my Dragonite. I'm going to bring it in, go for a Superpower, and this should be enough to take the Florges out, and we take that win. So you guys see in that match how we were able to draw out the biggest threat for the backline, which was a Snorlax, get that out of the way, and then with that out of the way, my opponent had a Florges and an Annihilate left, and Chandelure was able to handle those pretty easily. On to the next battle, we are going to see another Florges lead, and I swap out immediately into my Skeletor, and my opponent brings in an Excadrill, which I can incinerate down, but I'm going to go for a Shadow Ball just so that I could take a shield from my opponent. They shield, that's really good for me. I'm going to go ahead and invest my second shield so that I can incinerate this Excadrill down, and then my opponent now, they're either going to bring in their Florges or they're going to bring in what they have in the back. I'm thinking that my opponent might have another Steel type in the back, which is why they brought in the Florges, but it looks like they have an Ursaluna, so I'm not really sure why they brought in Florges. Ursaluna can somewhat handle the Skeletor. Skeletor is going to be resisting the tackles from it, but perhaps this Ursaluna doesn't have high horsepower, which is why they kept it in the back, because I don't have any shields left. So they can come in with Ursaluna, go for a high horsepower, and take my Skeletor out, but they decide not to do that. My opponent is going to bring in Florges now, and I go for that superpower. They are in the red. I just need to land one Incinerate to take this Florges out, but my opponent goes ahead and top lefts. That's going to be the final battle of the set, and it is going to be a 4-1, which is going to be more than enough to get us into Veteran. So let's move on to the next set. We do have a few more battles here to cover before I leave you guys. Alright, moving on to the next battle, we are going to see a Gyarados on the lead, and this Gyarados is going to be running Dragon Breath. Of course, I have to stay in this with my Dragonite. I'm going to go for these Dragon Claws, and if I can land 2 Dragon Claws, then I should be able to win this lead. Now, I'm going to let whatever this is go. It's just a crunch. I should be able to reach another Dragon Claw and take this Gyarados out. I just have to hope whatever my opponent has in the back, I'll be able to handle it. I want to swap immediately into my Skeletor because I don't want my Dragonite to get farmed down. They swap into their own Skeletor, and because I'm behind by a turn, I am going to lose that, unfortunately. So I let the Shadow Ball go, and surprise, surprise, my opponent has a Feraligatr in the back, so I go ahead and I top left. And at this point, I decided, you know what? That whole team, I think it would have lost to Goodra, so let's go ahead and build that Goodra and try it out. I have this Lucky 98 that unfortunately I got after Community Day, so it doesn't have the Thunder Punch. I had to go ahead and Elite TM it, but because it's lucky, I really wanted to build it. I have another 98 from Community Day that I did evolve, but I felt like the Stardust was worth the Elite TM. Like, I would have much rather used the Elite TM than use the Stardust. So we've built it, let's just use it and hope for the best. Up first, we are going to see a Togekiss on the lead. Awesome, great start so far. I swap into Skeletor, and my opponent has a Swampert. Okay, as soon as I took the Dragonite off my team, I get a Swampert. Whatever, I'm just going to go for these Shadow Balls up against the Swampert. I was able to survive a Hydro Cannon, which is really nice, and I would have been able to get to another Disarming Voice if my opponent did not throw another Hydro Cannon. So I decide to invest a shield there, and I take a shield from my opponent. I'm not able to reach another Disarming Voice. I'm just going to bring in Goodra now and farm this Swampert down. Let's see how much an Earthquake does. It actually doesn't do that much to Goodra, which is really nice. Goodra is quite bulky, but I am immediately going to swap into my Chandelure, and my opponent is staying in with their Togekiss. I'm going to go for the Shadow Ball, but my opponent, of course, they go ahead and they shield it. I'm going to invest my shield as well because this Ancient Power is going to hurt, and it looks like my opponent is going to have a Magnezone in the back. This is going to get really close. Hopefully this Incinerate takes it out. It does, and I will have energy for the Togekiss. Going to go immediately for that Shadow Ball, take the Togekiss out, and somehow we won that with a terrible lead and a terrible swap. Moving on to the next battle, it looks like we are going to get to see how Goodra will perform up against a Rhyperior. My opponent is going to go immediately for that Breaking Swipe, and I'm going to let the first one go. Unfortunately, we get debuffed. Just my luck. I'm going to go for an Aqua Tail, and my opponent goes ahead and shields it. Now this time it looks like we see MP Tide on the move, and again, another debuff on my Goodra. Now this Aqua Tail is not going to do a lot of damage to this Rhyperior. And by the way, this is double super effective, but my opponent swaps out into Florges, and I can swap out into my Skeletor, and now I am thinking that this might be a double fairy backline. Because they swapped into the Florges, they were probably trying to draw out the anti-fairy, or the fairy type counter. Lucky for me, I have 2 of them on my team, and I am expecting my opponent's 3rd Pokemon to be Primarina, because I have seen Rhyperior, Florges, Primarina as a team before, so that might be it. Hopefully the Primarina does not have Waterfall. I go for a Shadow Ball when my opponent swaps back into Rhyperior to try to take it out, but my opponent shields, and I tried to snipe them with the Aqua Tail that I had on my Goodra, but they threw that Breaking Swipe immediately, probably calling that I was going to do that, and then my opponent is going to have, as I predicted, that Primarina in the back. I go for a Shadow Ball against it, I'm able to take it out, and then I even reach a Shadow Ball up against the Rhyperior, and we take that win. Moving on to the next battle, we are going to see a Skeletor on the lead. I just have to watch out for the disarming voices because they are going to be super effective, but I can hit back for super effective with these Aqua Tails. Going to go for that first one, and my opponent actually shields it. Skeletor is pretty bulky, so it can take an Aqua Tail really well, but I am going to be able to reach another one here. I'm not sure if this was a CMP tie or not. Let's see if it was. It was a CMP tie, so we know now that Goodra wins CMP over Skeletor. This time it lands and it gets their Skeletor into the red, but it's still alive. And I no shield the disarming voice because I want to save my 2 shields for my backline. I swap into Skeletor, hoping that I could maybe farm their Skeletor down, but they swap immediately into their own Goodra. Now here is where I mess up. I should have just gone for the disarming voice, but for some reason I went for a Shadow Ball. I really thought my opponent would not shield their Goodra because I still have 2 shields left and they had 1 shield, so they went ahead and they used their final shield on their Goodra. Their backline is probably really weak to fire types, and if I had just gone for the disarming voice there, I would have been able to reach another move. But also my opponent would have been forced to throw their energy on my Skeletor so that I don't reach that other disarming voice. But I gave them an opportunity to farm Skeletor down, have a ton of energy for my Chandelure, and then they even catch my Flame Charge on their very low HP Skeletor in the back, and unfortunately I just get massively outplayed there and I take a loss. GG's to the opponent and really well played. Moving on to the final match of the video, we are going to be up against a Dragonite, and this was before I had developed a strategy on how to deal with the Dragonite. I throw the Thunder Punch and then I swap into Skeletor, which is not how I would play it now. I would stay in with Goodra and let Goodra go, because if I stay in with Goodra, I will be able to get that Dragonite into the red and into a range where Skeletor can farm it down completely. But in this case, I swap out while it's still in the yellow, and Skeletor is not going to be able to farm that down. My opponent brings in a Typhlosion, and I was really expecting that Thunder Punch to take the Skeletor out, but I survive. It doesn't do as much damage as I expect it to. I reach a Shadow Ball, I take a shield from my opponent, and then I even bring in my Goodra and I survive a Blast Burn. So we're able to take care of that Typhlosion. I still have 2 shields left, and before seeing what my final Pokemon is, my opponent swaps out into their Skeletor. They take a Shadow Ball, they no-shield it, and then my opponent top lefts. And that is going to be it for today. That was the first set I played with Goodra. I have been using it yesterday and today, so it's been performing really well, but today I switched back to Dragonite because Dragonite just does so much more damage and I prefer it over Goodra. But anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. If you guys like my content, please consider subscribing, maybe leave a like, it helps me out so much. And I will see you guys in the next video. Bye bye!